Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to the Monday meeting on so-called non-duality. So why is it so-called non-duality? Well, really, of course, non-duality is just a word or a term or a concept as we're talking about it. But this is quite unusual. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of non-duality videos on YouTube, I'm aware, and on the internet and so on. And I would say that what's going to be shared here, or what's shared in this meeting, is actually quite rare. It's quite unusual, not even what could be called the typical non-duality type discussion. Because what's meant by non-duality, if we have to use that term in this meeting, is a pointing to what is already as already being not two, as already being no separation, as already being absolutely whole. Quite often the traditional sort of idea of non-duality, particularly with the Advaita teachings, that kind of thing, to the best of my understanding, is the suggestion is there is someone who can get somewhere by doing something in order to have a realization or to see, for there to be a seeing of non-duality. And actually what's being suggested in this meeting is there is already no one, there is already no person. And it is the apparent person that is the apparent duality. So to suggest as non-duality that there is a someone who can do something to find their way to non-duality, or to see something called non-duality, or to have an experience or realization of something that is non-duality, of course, is just a part of the dream, or comes out of the dream, that there is someone who can do this already. The other part to that, or the other part to this, is a suggestion that actually even this appearance of a person, even this appearance of there being separation, is actually completely illusory. It isn't real. It's to the point of where it's not actually happening. So there may be people here in this meeting or listening to this now who would report to be having an experience of there being something, someone or something here which seems to be aware, conscious, or present to everything else and what's happening. And it seems to be with the arising of this self-awareness, this knowing, that the wholeness that this is already is somehow lost. It's seemingly lost, it's seemingly pushed away, because as long as there is this experience of there being or a sense of there being a someone, there is the need, which also arises with that, which is the need to know what's happening, what this is about, what we're talking about here, but also what everything's about, what's life about, what's this about. Because there's certain sort of qualities that seem to arise with this sort of I am experience, or the I am dream. The first of which is I am here and I am real, which also seems to make everything else into a reality. But the other sort of part to that is, as soon as there is the feeling of an arising of an I here, it automatically seems to create a something else there, or even a something else here. So then there is this apparent two things. That's the duality. There's me, and then there's everything else. And that seems to be, that would be reportedly the experience for the person. I am here, and then there's everything else happening to me. Or I am here as being aware, conscious, present to everything else that's happening. And that's the dream. That's the dream. And it seems to be, as long as there is this apparent person present, that the wholeness that this is, the non-duality, if we even have to call it that, seems to be lost. seems to be pushed away, because the need of the individual is to know. The individual is the knower. The need of the knower is to know. It needs to know because it feels like something's lost with the arising of the person, with the arising of the self-awareness. What seems to be lost for the person is everything. And it just sort of seems to manifest in the dream as just this sort of sense of something lost, something missing, something incomplete, something that needs to be added to this, to everything, or added to me in order to become whole, to become fulfilled. And it usually thinks, and some of the other sort of ideas of what non-duality is may even suggest that you need to become one with everything, or you need to become more fully present, or more fully conscious, or more fully aware. And all of these suggestions, of course, feed into the knowing of the knower, because it's something that it can know, it's something that it can work with. In this meeting, the individual starved of the knowing it needs to survive. That's not an intention, and that's not a any kind of technique or anything like that. It's just what seemingly happens, because this is a sharing that is coming from no one. This is a sharing that's coming from no thing. This expression reflects the no thing, or the emptiness that this is already, the not to-ness, which is the emptiness, which is the unknowingness that this is already. And that's absolutely nothing special about this. The suggestion, the radical part to this, the really radical suggestion, is that there's no one there either. There's no one listening to this, wondering what it's about. There's no one thinking, no one feeling, no one scratching their bottom. There's just no one. There's just what apparently happens, which is already not to. This is already perfectly itself. In that sense, it's absolute harmony. There's nothing lost or missing from this. There's nothing to find, but what's even worse than that is there's no one to find it. There's no one who needs to find anything. There's nothing that needs to be done, because there is already no one. So we can talk about that. We can ask questions, or there can be an asking questions. We're just sharing, that's fine. This is really just a conversation. We're not going to get anywhere, because this is already not two. We're not going to get anywhere. We can't get anywhere. But there can be an openness to another possibility, an openness to another possibility that there is no possibility to find what's longed for, because it isn't missing. Okay.
And yet hope springs eternal.
Oh yes, hope springs eternal for the individual. Yes, of course. Yeah, that's all it knows. It's the hope for hope itself. It doesn't know what it hopes for. It's hoping for hope. It's hoping it's going to find some hope somewhere. You won't find any hope here.
That's not necessarily, go ahead.
Well, funny you should say that. It's an unnecessary function of the dreamt experience.
Of the what experience?
Of the dreamt experience.
Dreamt, yes.
Of the dreamt reality, if you like.
An unnecessary function.
Hmm.
There's a lot of those, huh?
For the individual. Yeah, yeah, it's unnecessary.
And it's not necessarily a depressing or sad thing that there's no hope. It starts that way, but then it's like, it doesn't matter or something.
Hmm. Well, no hope is that there's nothing lost. Comment in the chat. Hi, Neil. Human beings are social creatures. So how does that relate with when there is no one or no mind? Well, the human creature continues, it would seem. And yeah, I would agree. Yeah, human creatures do seem to be social creatures. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I would say that all of that stuff just sort of continues. But the funny thing is, of course, there was no one being sociable in the first place. There was no one ever making friends or kind of learning how to do things in society. Learning apparently happens. Doing apparently happens. Society apparently happens. None of it's real. It's not unreal, of course. But it turns out that it doesn't need an individual. It's just a sort of an additional thing, experience, which actually seems to complicate all of that stuff. It just seems to be a complicating factor to whatever appears or whatever arises, because it's always appearing or arising to something that feels sort of artificial. It's kind of being run through an artificial filter. This I am, this me. And it turns out that all of that stuff just continues to happen, but only apparently. It's not happening as the reality of the individual, which this is a real happening in real time and real space. Is the mind a substitute for the me? I would say mind seems to be a part of the reality for the me. I have a mind, a claiming of a mind. I don't know what a mind is. What is a mind? If we had to describe what a mind, I think, feels like for the individual, it's that there is a center to the psyche of some kind. There is a position in the mental sense to which thoughts happen and things are happening. There is a mind processing what's happening. There's a brain apparently processing what's happening, but there isn't a mind. You're welcome. Yeah. Yeah, I posted a silly video earlier to Facebook. Yes, apparently farts are a necessary function of the body.
Yeah, and the thing is that, like, I don't know, somehow these days I tend to get so serious about everything, and then it's like such a nice occasion when something really funny is crossing whatever.
Oh,
Yeah, by
yeah.
it's really, it was awesome.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
non-duality is a very serious subject, didn't you know?
It is.
You have to read lots of books and
Oh,
yeah, and put lots of hours of meditation in and do hours and
yeah.
hours of agonizing, anguish-filled self-inquiry to find out
Yeah.
what's happening. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, the contemplation.
Very good.
The serious contemplation. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, no one could choose to do any of those things or to contemplate non-duality or anything like that. It's funny. Someone said to me the one time that they find themselves walking along the street having a conversation with themselves about non-duality because they've listened to so much of it on YouTube. And I remember laughing at the time because I used to do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of replays going on in activity.
Mm.
The videos and the words. And it's just what's happening.
Yes, of course it is. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. It's very serious business getting rid of this me that doesn't even exist. But I understand. I'm not making that. I'm not being. I don't mean to. Well, I am being facetious, but I don't mean to make light of it. I understand that the seeking, when there is that sort of sense to be someone, and the sense that something's missing, incomplete, unfulfilled. That's not a nice feeling. I understand that. It's not a nice feeling. It wasn't here when I was a seeker. Oh, there we are. Lindsay with a red nose on. I can see you. I can only see a few videos at the top because I've had to pin my screen for the recording.
It's all very serious.
Absolutely. All very serious, of course. Yeah. Yeah, what's the saying? You have to be extreme to reach the supreme.
Oh,
Mm. Question here in regard to all the ancient scriptures and yogic texts that describe the siddhis omnipotence, omnipresence, and healing touch that comes with the realization of illusion, enlightenment, are all of those not true for the non-duality nobodies? Well, I've not healed anyone with my touch that I know of just yet. No, maybe that's stuff that happens to yogis. I don't know. Maybe. It's got nothing to do with the end of the illusion of I am. I think those are all sorts of things that the individual wants to become as well. It wants to become omnipotent. It wants to become omnipresent. Wants to be this omnipresent awareness, this pure knowing. Wants to realize this pure knowing so that it can have it and own it, just like everything else that seems to arise for the individual. It seems to take ownership of everything that arises, and in that way, the aliveness that is already in everything that arises is denied. And another part to that, how could so many civilizations be so wrong about enlightenment? Well, one could only speculate, but that's the misunderstanding. No one becomes enlightened. Maybe there are enlightened beings out there, who knows? I'm not enlightened. Every civilization seems to have its fairy tale about enlightenment, liberation, what that means, what that is. And I think that's just the reflection of the individual in civilization or society. The individual wants stories about enlightenment and sages and mystics who have healing powers and knowledge of the universe. And it's not about being wrong. No one's right or wrong about this.
I have a question.
Yes, sure.
I heard Tony Parson. He says liberation is the recognition that there is no one by no one.
Say that again. Liberation is the recognition
that there is no one by no one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. How did that recognition, by what if it's by no one, by what?
Well, there isn't going to be an
How-
answer to this that's going to satisfy the need that wants to know the answer to the question. And it's really, it's just a recognition. No one recognizes, nothing recognizes. But the recognition is the overwhelming obviousness that this, what is already perfectly realized, if you like, perfectly fulfilled. So there's no need for enlightenment. Liberation is the end of the need for liberation. Liberation's never found, enlightenment's never found, because there's nothing about this that needs to be or become liberated or enlightened. The idea or the feeling or the sense that this is incomplete or missing is illusory, or it arises out of the dream that there is someone to be separate from what's already happening or from what appears to be happening.
Difficult for them.
Yeah, no, yes, there's just no answer to satisfy the questions of the individual, I'm afraid. There just isn't. And that's not a being trying to be elusive or coy or anything. There just aren't any answers for the individual. There aren't any answers to satisfy. There's nothing that could satisfy the knowing of the individual. And you may even find, if there is an individual there, if there's seeking happening there, that sometimes in the seeking journey, it can be like something is found and it does satisfy for a while, but then it seems to be temporary or transient, and then it's on to the next thing, looking for the next thing.
So liberation is the end of seeking.
Yeah, the seeking's never saturated. The need of the knower is never saturated by the knowing. Because what it actually longs for is the mystery, which is unknowing. That's what it feels it's lost. With the arising of the dream of I am, what the individual or the I am feels it's lost is the mystery that this is already, which seems to be hidden with the arising of that self-awareness, or with the arising of the self. And all that's being suggested from here is this is still the mystery. There isn't an individual. Nothing is being hidden, covered over, and there is nothing lost.
another question comes up.
Sure, yeah, of course.
When the body dies, the contracted energy collapse with the dying of the body.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's my impression. No one knows what happens when the body dies.
yeah,
of
okay.
course.
But what happened when the body goes to sleep? What happened to the contract?
Well, there's no one there, of course, in sleep. But of course, as soon as there's a waking in the morning, then of course the individual just sort of reasserts itself, the mind reasserts itself. So it's not like this contracted energy is an entity that's flying around and can leave a body and enter a body and all of that kind of thing. That's not the impression that's meant to give by that sort of contractedness that seems to give rise to the I am dream.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. It's just boundlessness appearing as a contraction or a contractedness. Contractedness isn't really even in the body. It seems to be in everything, actually. When there is that sort of contractedness, it does give the impression of a location, of a something here, which then seems to, pardon me, which then seems to automatically create this, well, this claiming of this position as an I am, and then everything else is there. That's the kind of the beginning of the duality, if you like. But that contractedness seems to be in everything. That knowing, it's a knowing energy, seems to be in everything. Everything is known. Everything reflects the contractedness of the apparent person. So it's something real, it's something solid, it's something fixed. It seems to be that sort of trappedness, that trapped sense, like a straitjacket, I've heard it called before. But everything else seems to be in that straitjacket, because when that contraction melts away, or that contractedness melts away back into boundlessness, everything else just opens up. And what's seen in that is the realness that appeared to be in everything for the I am experience was illusory. So everything just absolutely just becomes, doesn't become, it is already completely just spaciousness, infinite, timeless, no centers or edges, absolutely free. It's freedom already. Dimitri.
Hey, Neil.
Hey.
In a meeting like this, it's like really very simple, but at the same time, in my story, life is like constantly presenting all these stories about like all like processing some kind of trauma or like looking at interacting with people, and like I'm trying to like get as much away as possible, but all these situations keep presenting like with like all like someone tried to bully me and I tried to stand up to that and blah blah blah. Like all these stories keep playing of like improving the character, and sometimes it just makes me so mad, as if yeah, like here it's very simple, but then like in so-called real life, it's constantly with some kind of story of improving and like getting somewhere, and it's like the whole idea of just responsibility is just kind of taxing. I think I wanted to retire as soon as I went to my first day of work, like after the university or something.
Yeah. Well, the problem for the individual is it thinks it has a life and it thinks it is responsible for managing all of those things. That's just what's happening, of course.
Mm.
But I would say really, when the individual dies, then a lot of that stuff just gets a lot simpler and lighter. Shit still apparently happens. But I think all of the stuff you're talking about, all of the internal sort of narrative and push and pull and kind of coming apart, they all seem to be sort of symptomatic of the dream of the individual who feels they have to manage, do better, be better. That's that seeking energy. That's as we were talking about earlier, where the seeking can be uncomfortable for a lot of people. He talked about the need to get somewhere, the need to get something. All of that is being driven by the idea or the illusion that something's lost, that something's needed there in order for everything to be okay.
Yeah, I think that somehow when something apparently uncomfortable happens, for me it's like automatically the feeling of, because of this I lost something, like because of this it's like I'm not okay, or like whatever, like it's not whole.
Yeah, how is this affecting me? Yeah, how does this affect me? Yeah, that's the narrative for the individual. Yeah, totally. Yeah, how am I doing with this? What's my experience with this? Why is it this experience? Why isn't it another experience? Why isn't it a better experience? Why isn't it an easier experience? Yeah, that just dies. So then there is just what seemingly happens, what apparently happens. So anything could arise, anything could appear. Stress, yeah, sure. Pressure at work, sure. But it's not happening in a continuum. It's not being taken hold of and being sort of stayed with and wrestled with.
So like when it's my problem, it's much heavier than when it's just a problem.
And I'm not suggesting that it's not a problem. I'm not suggesting there shouldn't be problems, and I'm not even suggesting that I'm not sort of belittling what's happening there in any way. It's just simply pointing out to everything that's apparently happening isn't happening to or someone. But as long as there is the dream that there is someone there that everything, or the experience that there is someone there that everything's happening to, there will be an owner taking ownership of that energetically, in the sense of, this is my life, I have to manage this. I'm responsible for this. I need to make the right choices and decisions, of course, in order to work all of this stuff out.
Yeah.
When there is no one, there's just what arises, and there may be a response to that or not. But it just seems to be very much more simpler, because there isn't that kind of neurotic sort of all that neurosis that seems to happen when there is a apparent individual there.
Thank you.
Okay. In the end, this isn't about better. This isn't about having a better experience, of course. This isn't about an easier life. It's almost, it's not, but it could be misleading when I say it's just, everything just seems simpler or more simplistic in a way. Because that sounds like better to the mind, that sounds like better. Oh yeah, I want my life to be simpler. It's actually not what's being said. What's being suggested is there is no you who has a life. So it's not about a life being simpler. It's not about someone's life getting simpler. Someone's apparent life may get harder after so-called liberation. There might be more stress. It's just not happening for someone. There's nothing lost or missing in that. Stress is the absolute expression of unconditional love and unconditional wholeness and unconditional freedom, just appearing as stress. Okay. Well, just to bring to a close, just to reiterate what was said in the beginning, that what's longed for is this already. So there's no enlightenment or liberation that's going to happen somewhere in the future, somewhere else. This is it already. This is already liberation. This is already, dare I say, enlightenment. There is no one who needs to become liberated. There is no one who can become liberated. Because this is all there is. And there is no one. Okay, thanks for coming, guys. I'll just stop the recording.